Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to a dark place,
Oh, yeah.
the Alpine Manor nursing home
Mm-hmm.
in Walker, Michigan,
Wow.
back in 1987.
Okay.
And we're going to be talking about Gwendolyn Graham and Cathy Wood.
Okay.
And we've got some excerpts from a Wikipedia article about all this.
Mm-hmm.
And they were two nurses' aides who went from coworkers to lovers
Mm-hmm.
to something far more sinister.
Oh, wow.
So,
It's pretty striking how quickly their relationship kind of went from 0 to 60.
right.
Graham had just moved from Texas in 1986.
Okay.
And then, like, within a year,
Yeah.
she and Wood were allegedly killing patients together.
Yeah. It's just hard to fathom how a seemingly ordinary romance
Right.
could take such a dark turn.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
their first alleged victim,
Mm-hmm.
according to Wood's account,
Right.
was a patient who had Alzheimer's disease,
Okay.
and Graham supposedly smothered her
Mm-hmm.
while Wood kept watch,
Wow.
making sure no one walked in.
And the most unsettling part is that the death was considered natural.
Yeah.
No red flags.
Right.
No autopsy.
Wow.
And that lack of scrutiny may have emboldened them. You know, it's
Okay.
almost like they got away with it.
It's a terrifying thought, isn't it?
Totally.
That their first alleged murder
Yeah.
went unnoticed.
Right.
But it gets
Oh,
even more disturbing.
Yeah.
Here's where things get even more disturbing.
Okay.
Instead of being horrified by what they'd done,
Right.
they turn the killings into a twisted game.
So to really grasp the implications of this, we need to consider the psychology behind it a little.
Okay.
Turning something as horrific as murder into a game suggests like a profound detachment from reality and a very disturbing need for control.
Yeah.
And according to Wood, they initially tried to spell out M-U-R-D-E-R using the first letter of each victim's last name.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's like they were playing some sort of morbid word game
Right.
with human lives.
Totally.
Yeah. When that proved too difficult, they shifted their focus.
Okay.
Each murder became a day.
Mm-hmm.
In the phrase, I will love you forever and a day.
And there's a piece of evidence that supports this chilling notion.
What's that?
Wood wrote a poem to Graham
Okay.
that ends with the line, "You'll be mine forever and 5 days,"
Wow.
which sends chills down your spine when you realize
It does.
it aligns with the 5 murders they
Yeah.
committed.
It adds a whole other layer of creepiness to it, doesn't it?
Totally.
It suggests a level of premeditation.
Yeah,
That's truly disturbing.
absolutely.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, no.
Wood also claimed that Graham kept souvenirs from the victims,
Wow.
little tokens,
Oh, my God.
to relive the killings.
I know.
Really creepy. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie.
It does.
But the question is why?
Yeah.
What would compel someone to hold on to such grim reminders?
I think that's where psychology comes in. It's
Yeah.
a complex question.
Right.
With no easy answers. But I think it is worth noting that the police never found these alleged souvenirs.
Right.
So we have to consider the reliability of Wood's account, which, as we'll see, becomes a recurring theme in this case.
Okay, so we have this intense, twisted relationship
Right?
that fueled these horrific acts.
Yeah.
But like a lot of intense relationships,
Mm-hmm.
it eventually imploded.
Oh,
Graham started dating another nurse's aide and moved back to Texas,
okay.
leaving Wood behind.
Interesting.
Now, you might think that that's where the story ends,
Right.
but it's actually just the beginning of the unraveling.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a year after Graham left, Wood's ex-husband went to the police.
Why?
Why? Because Wood confessed to him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So this is one person's word against another.
Yeah.
The police took it seriously.
They did. They launched a full-blown investigation.
Right.
The detectives at Walker PD conducted multiple interviews with Wood.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, she started revealing details about the murders,
Okay.
casting Graham as the mastermind behind it all.
Interesting.
So now we have two conflicting narratives emerging.
Right.
But the police needed more than just Wood's word.
Sure.
They needed evidence.
Yeah.
They decided to exhume the bodies of two victims
Okay.
who hadn't been cremated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those unfamiliar with the term exhumation, basically means digging up a body
Right.
for further examination.
Yeah.
And here's where things get a little bit murky.
Okay.
Despite the exhumations, the medical examiner couldn't find any physical evidence
Uh-oh.
to definitively prove that the deaths were homicides.
Wow.
And this isn't unusual in these types of cases because smothering, there are often no visible signs of struggle.
Yeah.
However, it added another layer of complexity
Sure.
to the
Yeah,
investigation,
yeah.
so no physical proof.
Okay.
But the authorities are convinced, based on Wood's interviews,
Right.
that these were homicides.
Gotcha.
So they issue warrants for both women.
Wow.
December 1988. Wood is arrested in Walker, Michigan.
Okay.
Graham's apprehended in Tyler, Texas.
Wow. So the stage is set
Yeah.
for a big trial
Exactly.
where their stories are going to be pitted against each other
Right.
and leaving the jury to decide who, if anyone, is telling the truth.
It's going to be a real nail-biter.
Oh, yeah.
So the scene is set. Two women, once lovers, now on opposite sides of a courtroom,
Right.
each with their own version of the truth.
It's fascinating.
Talk about a nail-biter, right?
Yeah, what's really interesting here is the legal strategy that each woman adopted.
Okay.
Wood took a plea deal.
Okay.
She agreed to testify against Graham in exchange for a reduced sentence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and in her testimony, she painted Graham as the mastermind,
Okay.
the one who planned and carried out the killings while she was just a terrified lookout, forced into participating.
So she's basically saying, I was there, but I was too scared to stop it.
Right.
It's a pretty common defense tactic.
Yeah, shifting the blame, minimizing their role.
Right. But Graham stuck to a totally different story.
Yeah, Graham maintained her innocence throughout the entire trial.
Okay.
She claimed that the murders never actually happened.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
A mind game.
She argued that it was all an elaborate mind game concocted by Wood.
Really?
A twisted fantasy?
That's a pretty audacious claim,
Yeah.
especially given the severity of the charges.
Right.
So did she offer any explanation as to why Wood would invent such a gruesome story?
That's where the prosecution stepped in.
Okay.
They leaned heavily on Wood's testimony,
Mm-hmm.
portraying Graham as this dominant figure in the relationship,
Okay.
a manipulator who coerced Wood into participating.
Right.
And they had a key piece of evidence to support their claim,
What's that?
Graham's alleged confession to her new girlfriend.
Oh, wow. So we've got conflicting accounts,
Right.
no physical evidence,
Mm.
and a confession whispered to a third party.
It's a tough one.
The jury had a really tough job trying to sort through all this. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the other half don't quite fit.
Exactly.
And ultimately they sided with Wood.
Yeah.
That must have been devastating for Graham.
She was found guilty on 5 counts of murder
Wow.
and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. The judge sentenced her to 5 life sentences.
Wow, that's a harsh sentence.
It was, but the prosecution argued it was justified, considering the heinous nature of the crimes.
Sure. So what about Wood? What happened to her?
Well, because she had agreed to that plea deal,
Right.
she was convicted of 1 count of second-degree murder
Okay.
and 1 count of conspiracy.
Mhm.
Her sentence, 20 years on each count.
Wow. So a significantly lighter punishment
Oh, yeah.
compared to Graham's.
Right.
That difference in sentencing really highlights the power of plea bargains in our justice system.
It does. It raises a lot of ethical questions.
Right.
Are they a fair and just way to resolve criminal cases?
Mhm.
Or do they allow some perpetrators to escape the full consequences of their actions? And in this case, that disparity in sentencing definitely fueled a lot of public debate.
It makes sense. And it wasn't just the legal aspects of the case that sparked controversy.
Right.
After the trial, journalist Lowell Caulfield took a deep dive into the story.
Literally.
Yeah, he wrote a book called Forever in 5 Days.
That's right.
And he presented a different perspective on Wood,
Yeah.
questioning her portrayal as this helpless pawn in Graham's game.
He explored the possibility that Wood was a much more active and manipulative participant,
Interesting.
suggesting that she may have been driven by revenge after Graham left her for another woman.
So he's kind of turning the whole story on its head,
Right.
suggesting that Wood might have orchestrated the murders
Yeah.
and then framed Graham.
Potentially.
Wow.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if Wood's testimony, the very foundation of Graham's conviction, was as reliable as everyone thought.
And it gets even more complicated.
Oh, boy.
Caulfield uncovered reports that Wood told fellow inmates different conflicting versions of the events. In one version, she allegedly claimed she made up the whole story to get back at Graham for breaking her heart.
So she's admitting to lying under oath,
Potentially.
potentially sending an innocent person to prison for life.
Yes, mind-boggling.
Yeah, and in another version she allegedly shared with fellow inmates, she took full responsibility for the murders,
Wow.
claiming she framed Graham out of spite.
Those conflicting accounts cast a huge shadow of doubt over her original testimony.
Yeah.
And really the validity of Graham's conviction.
So what started as a seemingly open and shut case has turned into a labyrinth of unreliable narratives and unanswered questions.
The tragedy of it all is that amidst these legal battles and conflicting stories, the victims and their families were often overshadowed.
Yeah, you're right. It's easy to get lost in the drama of the trial and the twists and the turns of the investigation.
Right.
But we can't forget about the 5 lives that were lost.
Absolutely.
The families left to grieve and grapple with the aftermath.
Their pain and suffering are a stark reminder that these weren't just abstract legal concepts. These were real people.
Yeah.
With loved ones who were deeply impacted by these horrific acts.
And the families, in their grief and outrage, filed civil lawsuits against Alpine Manor,
Right.
arguing that the nursing home was negligent in hiring and supervising staff.
Yeah. It shines a light on the responsibility of institutions to protect those under their care.
Right.
It forces us to ask tough questions about accountability, oversight, and the systems we have in place to prevent such tragedies from happening again.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
So we've got conflicting narratives,
Yeah.
lack of physical evidence, and a legal system grappling with ambiguity.
Right.
It seems like every time we peel back a layer of this case, we find more questions than answers.
And this case, with its captivating twists and turns, continues to grip the public imagination.
Yeah, we're drawn to these true crime stories, aren't we?
We are.
Especially the ones that involve these complicated relationships and the moral dilemmas and the unanswered questions. It's like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing.
You're right. The Alpine Manor murders have been the subject of numerous documentaries, TV shows, and of course, Cauffiel's book.
Yeah, it seems like we can't get enough of these stories,
Right.
even if they leave us with more questions than answers.
It's like we're searching for a sense of closure.
Yeah.
A definitive answer to the question of what really happened. But in this case, that clarity remains elusive.
So the story doesn't end there. Even today, there are new developments
Right.
that keep this case in the public eye.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what happened next? Fill us in.
So in 2020, Cathy Wood was released from prison.
Really?
Yeah. And this sparked a ton of outrage
Right.
and appeals from the victims' families
Yeah.
who believed that she should have remained incarcerated.
Of course.
And it brings the case back into the spotlight
Yeah.
and forces us to confront these really uncomfortable questions
Right.
about justice, accountability, and the complexities of the parole system.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine the pain and the frustration. The families must feel knowing that one of the women convicted in connection with their loved ones' deaths is now free.
Absolutely.
It really underscores the lasting impact of these crimes
Yeah.
and the complex emotions they evoke.
The families argued that Wood's release disrespects the memory of the victims and minimizes the gravity of the crimes.
Yeah.
And their appeals highlight this ongoing debate surrounding the sentencing and parole of individuals involved in such heinous acts.
It's a debate that raises these really fundamental questions
Totally.
about the purpose of punishment.
Right.
Is it about retribution, rehabilitation, or a combination of both?
Exactly.
And how do we balance the rights of the convicted
Right.
with the needs and concerns of the victims and their families?
There are no easy answers.
No, and this case, with this lack of physical evidence
Right.
and the reliance on these conflicting testimonies,
Yeah.
further complicates these questions.
Absolutely.
You know, we keep circling back to this lack of physical evidence, and it is unsettling.
Yeah.
We're left grappling with the weight of the accusations,
Right.
the need for accountability, but also this nagging feeling that we may never know the complete truth.
And that's what makes this case so fascinating, yet so frustrating.
Yeah.
We're left to sift through these fragmented narratives, these conflicting accounts,
Right.
trying to piece together a puzzle where some of the pieces are missing and others just don't seem to fit.
It makes you wonder if Wood hadn't confessed.
Right.
Would these murders have ever come to light?
Yeah.
Would these 5 victims have simply just been forgotten?
It's possible.
Their deaths attributed to natural causes.
It's a chilling thought.
It is. And it speaks to the limitations of our justice system.
Absolutely.
The fact that sometimes justice hinges on a single confession,
Right.
a single piece of testimony that may or may not be reliable.
And it also highlights the vulnerability of those under institutional care,
Right.
the importance of safeguarding their well-being, and the need for robust systems of oversight.
So what does this all mean for us?
Yeah.
What can we take away from this chilling tale of love, betrayal, and murder?
Well, besides the reminder to choose our romantic partners carefully,
Right, of course.
I think perhaps the most crucial takeaway is the importance of critical thinking.
Okay.
We live in a world that's saturated with information,
Right.
often presented in a way that caters to our desire for these easy answers
Mm-hmm.
and clear-cut narratives.
Yep.
But the Alpine Manor murders remind us that truth can be very elusive,
Right.
especially in cases like this where evidence is scarce and motivations are murky.
So we need to be discerning consumers of information,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to these true crime stories.
Right.
We should question assumptions, consider multiple perspectives, and be wary of narratives that seem too neat, too convenient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't just passively accept the stories that are presented to us.
Right?
Dig deeper. Seek out those alternative perspectives.
Yeah.
And remember, there's often more to the story than what initially meets the eye.
And this case is a prime example of that.
It is. What initially seemed like an open and shut case turned into this tangled web of conflicting accounts and unanswered questions.
Right.
It challenges us to confront the limitations of our legal system
Mm.
and the complexities of human behavior.
And it forces us to consider the profound ethical questions surrounding plea bargains,
Yeah,
the power of confession, and the very nature of justice itself.
totally.
So as we reach the end of our deep dive into the Alpine Manor murders, we're left with a sense of unease, this lingering feeling that there's more to this story than we may ever know.
And that perhaps is the most disturbing aspect of this case.
Yeah.
The murders themselves are undeniably horrific.
Right.
But the lack of definitive answers,
Mhm.
the enduring ambiguity is what truly haunts us.
It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the most disturbing mysteries are the ones that remain unsolved.
Absolutely.
And that's where we'll leave you today, with the unsettling truth that sometimes, despite our best efforts, some puzzles may never be fully solved. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop seeking the truth, however elusive it may be.